You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics, but also lots of public policy this evening, because we have as our guest Sharon Fairley. She is running for Attorney General in the Democratic primary. That primary is March 20th. There are 8 candidates, so this is a really interesting race. We hope to have 4 or 5. Sharon is the 3rd person we've taped. We're taping this, as you said, on February 8th. You'll probably see this in a week or two, so by the time you see it, there'll be about a month left for the primary. We'll come back and tell you in more details about Sharon. I really want to get into the show. I mean, you should know she's tremendously educated, tremendously qualified for this position. She started out in her education and, well, college at Princeton, undergraduate, magna cum laude, which means she did extremely well in terms of grades, Wharton Business School, and an MBA, 20 years or so of practicing in marketing and advertising in the world of business. Decided, we'll find out more about that, perhaps why, but decided to go to law school in 2003 at the University of Chicago, my alma mater, so here, plug for the University of Chicago Law School and the great institution that it is.
Absolutely.
But Sharon, so cutting right to it, okay, and I don't know if it has much to do with Attorney General, but it has so much to do with what's gone on in the state of Illinois, and at least the tone of a good part of what the Attorney General perhaps deals with, is you got to this position. We'll get to it later, but in 2015, you were appointed to be the chief administrator at IPRA, right?
Yes, I
Independent Police Review Authority.
Yes, sir.
That's the end of, that's 2015.
Yes, in December.
So, and people know that, you tell me, when you got appointed to that position, what was the most important thing going on in the city and on your mind at that time?
Sure. Well, of course, this was fairly soon after the video of the Laquan McDonald officer-involved shooting had been publicly released. And there was grave concern about the quality of the police accountability system here in Chicago as a result of that. So the mayor had taken a number of steps to address that issue, including making a change of leadership at the Chicago Police Department. But he also decided to change the head of that agency, and I was asked to take on that role. And really,
asked by who?
The mayor.
He appoints you to that position?
Yes. Okay. I was appointed with the consent of the city council, of course.
You know the mayor?
I do know him.
He's not a stranger? How have you known him over the years?
Well, you know, we're not very close. I mean, that's why the call was kind of a surprise to me, because, you know, obviously I had met him on a couple of occasions, but certainly less than a few. I mean, I did not know him well. So I was actually kind of surprised. But I think it's because, you know, I had a reputation for being a smart attorney and capable, and that's why, you know, he made the call. And so, you know, I became a lawyer to serve, and it was a bit of a scary proposition. And when I told people that I had accepted and agreed to take on that role, you know, a lot of people thought I was, you know, thought it wasn't a great decision, right? Because it was going to be such a tough job. But I really believed that I had the skills and experience to do it and make a change. And so I really was committed to the mission of reforming the agency, and it was a great experience.
Well, okay, so at that time, did you mention that this was the era or time of Laquan McDonald?
Yes.
Okay, and what happened and when with Laquan McDonald? How does that relate to the mayor? How does that relate to you in this position and to your race for Attorney General? There are at least 10 questions there, but yes, Sharon went to the University of Chicago Law School, so she can parse that easily. Right. Magna cum laude at Princeton, Wharton MBA, piece of cake.
Yeah, so my first priority was to make sure that the investigation of the officer-involved shooting and the surrounding facts around the reporting of it were going to be investigated in a way with integrity and quality. So almost the first action that I did was literally the second day I was in the job. I referred the matter to the Office of the Inspector General for further investigation. And that's because I believe that the agency that I was hired to run really didn't have the credibility at that moment to undertake that investigation and do it in a way that would be credible to the citizens of Chicago. So I passed that referral on to the Office of the Inspector General, and as we know, as a result of that, there was an investigation that actually led to indictments.
What did the mayor have to do with this thing? Because in December, when you came there, it was December of 2015, right?
Yes.
He had been reelected in April of that year, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Why is that relevant to this case?
Well, I mean, I know that there's
Is
a
it?
lot of discussion around the timing of the release of the video and whether it should have been released earlier.
What was the video and what did it show?
Well, the video, obviously, it was a video that showed the officer-involved shooting and showed some.
When was that approximately?
I believe.
Ballpark.
I mean, it was probably about a year before.
It's like a fall of 2014?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
It showed
right.
what happened? Just give us the facts.
Well, I mean, the facts were that this gentleman was shot, and he was shot 16 times.
Who was the gentleman?
Laquan McDonald.
And he was shot by whom?
He was shot by a Chicago Police Department officer.
Jason Van Dyke.
Yes.
16 times in 16 seconds. What was he doing to warrant that shooting?
I'm not going to go there because it's not my job, right? It wasn't my job to
No,
evaluate
but you're running
shooting.
for Attorney General of the
Yes.
state of Illinois.
Yes.
I think the viewers want to know. I think that what we say before the show, there probably are 1 million people voting in that race for Attorney General, right?
So this is an ongoing criminal case.
But
and
you're not investigating.
I know,
you,
but
you
I think
farmed
it would
out.
be really, really inappropriate for me to try to influence the jury.
I'm not saying to
before-
influence. I just want to know the facts. And as much
Yeah.
as you can tell, I can't believe running for Attorney General of the state of Illinois, you'd be taking the position you can't talk about it. There may be some things you can't say, and
Yeah,
we'll respect that.
sure.
But talk about it, you must.
I can talk about the whole concept of officer-involved shootings because I'll tell you, in the job that I had, I reviewed dozens of them.
No, but
and
I read in the paper.
and-
Okay, I'll just say it. You don't want to
and-
say it? The guy was shot 16 times. Laquan McDonald was shot 16 times in 6 seconds.
Yes.
He was shot by Jason Van Dyke. This is the fall of 2014.
Right.
He's walking along. What's Jason Van Dyke doing? Can you tell us what he was doing when he was shot?
I don't know. I didn't
Okay,
investigate
so
the case.
what we read in the paper is he was Mr. Laquan McDonald. I think he's 16 or 17. He's got a pocket knife and he's scratching cars. The police are called about this. Police come out and out. I think there are like 15 police before Jason Van Dyke shows up. They're looking for a taser, I think. I think they can't find somebody who's got a taser in the city of Chicago. So while they're waiting, and they're not too upset because it's not too terrible, right?
Yeah. So this is
So what
like I
happens?
said,
Jason Van Dyke comes out. You can tell us. You read it. I read it in the paper. What did you read that Jason Van Dyke did when he came there?
I can talk about what I read. I don't remember what I read, but
Okay.
what I can talk to you about is the other cases that I actually did
No, I don't want to.
investigate.
We'll get to
and
this.
I did review, and I had other cases where there were several shots very similar.
Okay, but we'll get to that in a
Sure.
second.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know my viewers. They know what they want to hear.
Yeah.
They want to hear about this case, and they want to get your views as much as you'll tell us on this, because it's so important, and and you're close to it.
I'm not close to it. I said I referred the case, so
Okay.
I don't know anything more than anybody else, and that's why I'm not going to opine. It would be really inappropriate.
Okay, well, I've asked
I don't have all the
I've
evidence
asked
of the
others
case.
who are running for
The
Attorney General
video
about
in an
this.
officer-involved shooting is only one aspect of the evidence that somebody would review. And this is something that I know extremely well, having reviewed dozens of officer-involved shootings. Video is only one type of evidence, and it doesn't necessarily capture all the details and facts of an incident. So I would never, ever opine on a case based on incomplete information, and that's what you'd be asking me to do. Now, if you'd like to ask me on the cases that I did rule on, because I had access
We'll come to
to
that. Okay.
all of the evidence, then I'd be happy to talk about
I
this.
don't want to take too much time on it because it's your race and you're running for AG.
Sure.
We've already done like 5 minutes, maybe more on
Sure.
this, so I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to abuse my role as
Okay.
a host here.
Okay.
But we have started. I want to get to it, and then we'll get out to other things. But the point is here. Jason Van Dyke, according to the press reports, according to the video, with all the limitations that Sharon has noted quite properly, with all of those limitations, it appears that He jumps out without wasting too much time, needlessly shoots a guy 16 times in 6 seconds, and he's dead. And more importantly for this thing, for this show, for this race, the mayor knew about that video for a long time. Obviously, the police knew about it. I think we can say it's clear from the press reports and other statements, the mayor sought to suppress that until he was reelected. Can we say that?
That you can say that all you like. I'm not going to opine
You're not
on
gonna
that
opine
because
on
I
that.
don't have that information. I wasn't privy to that information. I wasn't
Okay.
there. I didn't investigate the case.
Should somebody look at that, and who should look at it? Should it be just this investigation that you referred it to under the ultimate direction of Joe Ferguson?
There was an investigation conducted by the Inspector General.
By Joe Ferguson.
Yeah.
And was he charged to look at that specific issue? Did the mayor know of that? Did he suppress it until after he was reelected? And was that wrong legally and or ethically?
That's a question that you need to ask him.
No, that's
That
what I'm saying.
not-
Was that under, because you
Sure.
referred it, was
Right.
it under the purview of Joe Ferguson to look at that by your referral?
My referral had to do with what was in my investigatory responsibilities, was looking at what the police officers did.
Not about the mayor?
No.
So even if you had handled that yourself,
That would not have been in my jurisdiction.
so you don't think Joe that would be in his jurisdiction?
That would be within his jurisdiction.
would be in
That's
his.
why I would say that's something that you'd have to ask him about.
Have we heard anything about that? Have you?
I don't.
Because as you say, there have been indictments, is that right?
Yeah, there have been several indictments.
So presumably, if he looked at that and found that, he might have, sought to indict the mayor?
That's not within his purview,
That's
right?
not. What would he do if he
that's-
looked at that?
So the Office of the Inspector General can investigate the administration and employees of the administration and all the
Not
city
the mayor.
agencies.
Who
Yes, the mayor.
investigates that?
Yeah, and that would include the
Oh,
mayor, absolutely.
okay. I thought you said it
So,
wasn't
no,
in
I'm
his
just,
purview.
well, if you let me finish.
Go ahead. Okay.
And so, he can't indict someone, right? Only the state's attorney can do that, right? And so he can conduct an investigation, but the state's attorney would have to be the one to decide on that. So,
Okay, so he can investigate it, and if he found something there, he would refer it to the state's attorney.
yes, he could,
And the state's attorney now is
Kim Fox.
Kim Fox, and
Right.
she would look at it. And you have no idea whether that's happening at this point?
I have no idea. That's completely out of my...
Could be happening or not.
It could be, it could or not be. I have no idea.
What's the closest case you had when you were at IPRA or COPA to the facts that we've just been talking about here? You said there were other cases, they were close. Tell us about them. What happened and what did you do and what was the result?
Sure. Well, so, I reviewed dozens of officer-involved shooting cases, and I called them as I saw them, where we had evidence to show that I believed that the officer had gone outside of the policy and the way he conducted himself, then we called them that way. Otherwise, we called them the other way. So there were a number...
How many cases were somewhat comparable to this specific thing? An officer killed somebody in a short amount of time with, apparently from what we know in the news, it was unjustified. Any of cases that you had that were somewhat comparable to that?
All of these cases are very different. The facts of these cases are very different. So, obviously they all end up where an officer discharges a weapon, but the circumstances leading to that discharge of the weapon, the nature of the incident, they're all very, very different. I have seen cases where an officer fires multiple times. There was one case that I definitely called outside of policy. The individual involved in that case was a young man by the name of Flint Farmer. And that officer discharged his weapon 13 times. But again, the circumstances under which the firearms discharge occurred were somewhat different. So I can't say it's completely analogous to the Laquan McDonald shooting, other than the fact that there were numerous shots that were fired. The other thing that's really important that people need to understand is that when you're looking at evaluating a use of force incident, including a shooting, anyone who's in the position to hold an officer accountable is constrained by the laws and the policies that govern the use of lethal force. And in my view, and this is something that I've tried to make clear in this race, in my view, the law and the policy in this area has fallen way behind what we as a society believe is appropriate. For example, right now the state of the law allows an officer to fire an individual who is fleeing, who is running away, so long as that officer reasonably believes, or there's probable cause to believe, that that individual has committed a forcible felony, so a violent felony. whether or not that individual represents an imminent threat to that officer or anyone else at that moment. And so a lot of times you have these situations where we as a society no longer would find that that's really appropriate.
So what do we do if there's a felon? See, an officer thinks a felony has occurred.
Correct.
He has reasonable grounds for that.
Yes.
Reasonable grounds to endeavor to arrest a person
Yes.
and detain that person for further investigation.
Correct.
The person says, screw you, I hear new standard, you're not going to shoot me. He starts running away. What does the officer do?
Well, that's the problem, is that the law would permit the officer to use lethal force in that situation.
And what would you say to the officer under your proposed standard that you're going to have? What would the standard be, and how would it be applied in that
The
case?
standard really should be that an officer can only use lethal force when a person represents an imminent threat to that officer or somebody else. And that's the way the Chicago Police Department's policies now reflect that idea. And that's what that's a standard
So they currently do that, even though you're saying the law is not clear that's the standard. The Chicago police use that standard.
Correct.
Okay, so in my case that I proposed, that my hypothetical, what should the officer do?
The officer is not authorized to use lethal force,
So
but the officer should use other tactics to try to bring
Which would be what?
bring that person to justice.
Give us something real. You know the police.
Sure.
You've been involved in these types of issues. What would you advise the policeman to do that carries out his responsibilities to the citizens of Chicago, say it's a Chicago policeman,
Yes.
and is within the standard you said? What does he or she do?
Continue to give chase, continue to surround the individual, call in to get assistance and backup until they can locate the individual.
So the officer is standing there. The person is running
Yes.
away faster. He's
Yes.
faster than that person. He should continue, or she should continue to chase, even though they're going to be 10 yards away, then 30 yards away,
Yes.
then 50 yards.
Yes.
Basically, let that person go unless some other person
Yes.
can apprehend him. That's what you're saying they do.
Because
they don't shoot in
otherwise-
the leg. They don't shoot not to mortally injure the person.
No,
they don't. They
they're
can't
not
try to
trained
do that.
They're not trained to do that.
Okay.
They're not trained. I know everybody's used to sort of watching these cop shows, right?
Yeah.
And thinking that the ordinary
Okay.
police officer has that kind of firearm skills. They absolutely do not. They're not trained to do that. When they're trained to use their weapon, they're trained to shoot to kill.
Okay.
And so what the issue is that we do not want officers on the street to be judge, jury, and executioner. That's just not appropriate. And most people would agree with me. And so that's where the law needs to catch up to our societal norms on this issue.
But you're saying the police department on its own has changed in Chicago. That's
Yeah, so
not necessarily across the state of Illinois.
Correct.
Just in Chicago.
Yes.
That's what you're speaking to. Okay. I want to get, because we've gotten more time than I want on this issue, but it's an important issue.
Sure it is.
So now I want to get more broadly to what you're running for as Attorney General.
Yes.
What are the core things that you're concerned about? Because some of your materials say, Trump is taking away our civil rights, he's taking away our health care, he's taking away our votes, he's taking away the right to a decent living. Seriously, you said these things, right?
Yes.
Tell us, how is he doing all those things, and what should the Attorney General do to modify that or stop that?
Absolutely. So and my goal as Attorney General, right? I have three big projects that I want to focus on, right? The first is criminal justice reform, which really includes the idea of police accountability, because I believe that this is an issue that is a statewide issue. It's not just here in Chicago. And we know that public safety really depends on us having trust between the communities, the law enforcement agencies, and the communities that they serve. And so I really believe that this is an area in which the Attorney General can just play a much more proactive and strategic role. The second thing is public integrity and transparency. I believe that is essential to democracy, and I believe that we have some pretty serious issues with
Tell me the Trump stuff. I just was asking about Trump.
getting there.
Okay.
Okay. So then the third piece, the third priority, is to protect the citizens of Illinois, protect their civil rights and their health and their well-being from whatever political or corporate forces seek to take advantage of them. And I believe that several policies and practices of the Trump administration are actually harmful to the citizens of our state and would take the action
The
necessary.
most important ones.
Yeah.
What are the most important ones, and how do they impact on the citizens of Illinois? And what would you do as Attorney General to modify that?
So there are several, right? So we start with the administration's approach to immigration, then on to civil rights, the way the administration is treating people of color, the LGBT community, the immigrant community, the undocumented.
Let's take one or two of
Then
those.
let me just finish the list.
Again, it's your time, but we're down to like 12 minutes left, so
Sure.
it's
The
your time.
environment is
Okay.
also a really important
Okay.
area where the positions that are being taken are really harmful to us. And then, of course, the criminal justice system, the void that's being left by the Sessions Department of Justice here. We have an example of that, of walking away from police reform. So there are several ways in which the Trump administration is really pulling back, either pulling out of important programs that are important to protect our citizens, or actually taking action that's
What are
harmful.
you as AG going to do to modify or combat those positions of President Donald Trump specifically?
Sure. And so there are several ways. I mean, obviously, is using the rule of law, so filing lawsuits where there's a legal argument to be made.
But give me a specific action of the president and a specific lawsuit you would file. I want to be very specific here.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, the EPA, the EPA is, I believe, falling short on its enforcement under the Clear Water Act and the Clear Air Act, and I would use the rule of law to really go against the administration's policies and how it's implementing those federal laws. So there are places
So you
where
would sue the federal EPA to enforce the law,
Yes.
in your view, more stringently, the federal EPA to act in
Sure.
accord with what you understand the federal law to be.
Sure.
So you would sue them in federal court, is that right?
Yes.
And you have standing to do that as Illinois Attorney General?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this is the environment is actually where the Attorney General has its broadest powers to protect.
sure.
And we as Illinois citizens have a constitutional right to a healthy environment in which to live, and the Attorney General has the primary responsibility for maintaining that. So there's a number of ways.
And has Attorney General Lisa Madigan in the last year done that? Filed a lawsuit on the specific environmental issue that you're talking
The
about?
attorney, Lisa Madigan, has actually, she's been a very, very strong proponent of, enforcement of the environmental law, whether it's state law or federal law here in Illinois. And so she's charted a very, very strong path, and I really look forward to
No,
following
but has
that.
she done that? Because she's been there, he's been there, Trump, for a year.
Yes.
If this is as you say, why hasn't she filed a lawsuit in the last year?
So she's done a number of things. For example, she has pushed back on the administration's pull back away from the Clean Power Plan. She's advocated for stronger vehicle emission standards. There's a number of actions that she's taken that are really, really important in this era. But more importantly, she's actually stood up and taken important action in several respects to protect the consumers here. For example, pushing back on harmful legislation. She was really working hard on. She's worked hard on the fracking issue. She worked hard.
Okay, but
on,
I was focusing on Trump, which is
Okay.
really, you
Sure.
make a big thing of that when you announced for governor. I saw your
Yes.
press release.
Yes.
Trump, Trump, Trump. So far, we got one thing, environmental. Anything else?
Sure. Yeah. How about the way that the ban on LGBT community and the military? We have attacks on the voting rights, the voting commission.
So
that
what
he
would you do?
established.
Would you sue in federal court to reverse that new standard that the president has announced? Because I think the military hasn't even said they're doing that, right?
Right.
So that's not ripe for a lawsuit there, is there?
It could be. I'm not sure.
It could be, okay.
But I would either do it myself or work in. So right now, the Democratic attorneys general across the country have served as this really great coalition in terms of pushing back. So there's a lot of work going on across that coalition in terms of lawsuits and filing amicus briefs
So
on all
forgetting
these
Trump
issues.
now, just for a second,
So the other thing that Attorney General Madigan did was she provided law enforcement here in Illinois with guidance on how to be consistent with the Trust Act, which protects us as a sanctuary state, which is also a really important measure to make sure that our law enforcement agencies are not being used as an arm of the federal government when it comes to enforcing their immigration policy. And this is a really important statewide issue here. This is not just because it's the right and moral thing to do for undocumented individuals here. It's because it affects our economy and it affects our public safety. When we have an immigrant community that's not comfortable with interacting with law enforcement, then we have fewer crimes that are reported and we have fewer individuals that are willing to step step up to the plate to help us prosecute crimes.
So this is all about being a sanctuary state and a sanctuary city.
That's
is that
one.
right?
That's also an area where,
Okay.
where the Trump administration has been a problem. Yeah, absolutely. And so yes, there are lawsuits being filed to say that that policy of taking grant money away from our state because we won't follow their immigration policy is against the law.
So as you look across the state of Illinois and say you are the Attorney General, what is it you think that concerns the 13 million people here the most, whether it's Trump or not, or something else, that you can fundamentally affect in your first year or two as Attorney General? What is the greatest concern out there that you can address by your actions as Attorney General?
So my focus is going to be on public integrity, criminal justice reform, and then protecting our rights. The environment is one big part of that.
Public integrity means what?
Meaning more accountability out of our political leadership. I believe that people are very frustrated
But
with
what
the lack
specifically would you do as Attorney General? Who would you make more accountable and how?
I believe we need more accountability at all levels of government in the state, and I've already sort of laid out my plan on this. It's on the website. So
No, I've read it, but I've read it. I'm just trying to get specific.
Yeah, I am.
Okay,
I'm
I don't want to tell people to go read it.
Sure.
I want them to hear from you.
I was about to answer that.
Okay.
If you let me get a word in. So the first thing is I would ask for changes to be made to the Illinois statutes governing the Legislative Inspector General and the Ethics Commission, because I believe that body does not have sufficient teeth. Then the next thing I would do
I'm sorry,
is
what body was that?
the Legislative Inspector General.
Okay.
We know that we went
Okay.
without one for 3 years,
Right,
right?
okay.
That office is, there are a lot of aspects to the way that office operates that are not independent. It has to ask for permission to issue subpoenas. It can't hire people without permission from the political leadership. The hiring has to go through the leadership. So there's a lot of ways that office is not independent and is not as strong a check and balance on the system as it should be. The next thing is I would form a public integrity task force, combining law enforcement and state's attorneys across the state to ensure that they have the expertise, but also to really push to make sure that they have the political will to actually take action
Okay.
and then conduct quality investigations of our political leaders.
Is there anything about crime? Because say 2016, murder and shooting in Chicago went up dramatically, right?
Yeah.
And then they came back, but not completely, came down, but not completely in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Can your office, as Illinois Attorney General, do anything about that crime, especially in the inner city of Chicago, especially on the south side and west side, where most of these rampant or sharp increase in murders and shootings occurred, similar inner city areas across the state, whether it's in Rockford, whether it's in East St. Louis? Can you do anything, or is that simply, oh, that's a problem for the state's attorney?
No, absolutely. Are you kidding?
So tell me,
that's part
we
of
don't
why
have
I'm
much
here.
time, so tell me in a minute, what can you do?
Well, the first
Give them
thing
some
is
idea
the
what
first
you
thing
can
is
do.
to jump in on the police reform issue. So Attorney General Madigan started us down the path to see court-ordered oversight of the reform of the Chicago Police Department. So that's the first priority. And because I'm the only person in this race who has any direct experience in police reform, that's going to be a major
So
priority.
jump on that to
Yes.
continue the reform that
Right.
the Justice Department
Yes.
under Trump was backing away from. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the second thing is to
Okay.
make sure that to make sure that the law enforcement community in our state is actually working on effective crime and violent crime fighting strategies. And I believe that some of the work that's been done, particularly out of the legislature, is based on rhetoric and not based on what works. And what I believe we need to do is make sure that we are really using proven crime fighting
What do you
strategies.
think works? Do you have an idea of what
I think
works?
that there is some work that's been done out of New York and LA that we can benefit from.
Do you know what
I've-
that would be? Can you
so
tell
when
people?
yes, absolutely. So what I've read and what I understand is that really to be effective at fighting violent crime, you need a combination of community-oriented policing and problem-oriented policing. And I believe the department has really started to go down this path at looking at innovative ways to approach both of these. We got away from community-oriented policing here in Chicago. It was really community-oriented policing started here, a couple of decades
So
ago.
that's SharonFairley.com. I hate to end it so abruptly, but we have to go. We're out of time. I just want to invite everybody to come back next week and every week to Public Affairs. We'll try to have more of the AG candidates on. Thank you so much, Sharon Fairley, for coming here.
Thank you.
We'll hope
Thanks
you
for
can
having
come
me.
back and we'll finish what we didn't cover.
Sounds good.